Welcome to Guy Compendium, the ultimate podcast for fans of comic books, movies, and the unforgettable villains that make them unforgettable. I'm your host, Finley Strong. Lex Luthor is one of the most iconic villains in comic book history, standing as the ultimate human adversary to Superman, first appearing in Action Comics 23 in 1940. Created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, Lex Luthor has evolved from a mad scientist to a multifaceted character whose motivations and actions have deepened over time. Lex Luthor represents the apex of human intellect and ambition, contrasting sharply with Superman's alien origins and godlike powers. What makes Lex Luthor a compelling character is not just his ruthless pursuit of power, but also his complex personality, which has been explored in various narratives across the decades. Lex Luthor's fundamental conflict with Superman is ideological. He believes that Superman, an extraterrestrial being, undermines human potential and self-determination. Luthor's hatred for Superman often stems from a combination of jealousy, fear, and a desire to prove that he, a mere human, can surpass an alien with godlike abilities. Luthor sees himself as humanity's true savior, someone who should lead humanity to greatness without the crutch of a superpowered alien. This philosophical and psychological depth has made Luthor one of the most interesting and enduring villains in the DC universe. Lex Luthor's character has undergone significant changes throughout his history, reflecting the evolving themes and sensibilities of comic book storytelling. From his beginnings as a mad scientist to his reinvention as a corporate mogul and political power player, Lex Luthor's story is a testament to the adaptability and complexity of his character. Lex Luthor made his first appearance in Action Comics 23 in 1940. In his debut, Luthor was depicted as a red-haired mad scientist who plotted world domination, using his advanced technology and brilliant mind. He was initially a standard villain archetype of the time, a power-hungry megalomaniac who saw himself above the law. His early stories featured elaborate plots to defeat Superman and seize control of the world, often involving scientific gadgets, robots, and death rays. However, his defining characteristic was his intellect. Unlike other Superman villains who were often depicted as physically powerful or monstrous, Luthor was always a mortal man who used his genius and cunning to match Superman's might. This dynamic of brains versus brawn laid the foundation for Luthor's ongoing rivalry with Superman. A turning point in Luthor's visual portrayal occurred in Superman 10, 1941, where he was first depicted as bald due to a coloring error that was later embraced and became his trademark look. This bald appearance would go on to define Luthor for decades to come. The Silver Age of comics, mid-1950s to 1970, brought significant changes to Lex Luthor's character and his relationship with Superman. During this era, comic books were subject to the Comics Code Authority, which imposed strict guidelines on content, leading to more toned-down and fantastical storytelling. During this period, Luthor's origin story was further developed. Adventure Comics 271 1960 introduced a retcon that placed Luthor and Superboy in Smallville during their youth, revealing that they were once friends. Luthor admired Superboy and even attempted to create a kryptonite antidote to help him. However, a lab accident caused by a chemical fire destroyed his hair and embittered him against Superboy, whom he blamed for the mishap. This accident marked the turning point in Luthor's life, leading him to vow vengeance against Superman. The Silver Age also solidified Luthor's role as a scientific genius. He was depicted creating advanced technology, wielding anti-gravity devices, and crafting androids to challenge Superman. His schemes often had a more light-hearted or outlandish nature, which was typical of the Silver Age's style. Stories from this era portrayed Luthor as an eccentric, sometimes humorous villain with a deep-seated vendetta against Superman. The Bronze Age of comics, early 1970s to mid-1980s, saw a shift towards more mature and nuanced storytelling, and Lex Luthor was no exception. During this era, Luthor's character became more psychologically complex, and his motivations were explored in greater depth. The Luthor Nobody Knows Superman 292, 1975 is a notable story from this era that delves into Luthor's psychology, presenting him not just as a villain motivated by revenge, but as someone with a deep ideological belief. Luthor saw Superman as a threat to human achievement and autonomy, believing that an alien protector would make humanity dependent and weak. This interpretation of Luthor as a defender of human potential against an alien savior added layers to his character, making him more than just a mad scientist. Additionally, this era introduced the concept of Luthor as a corporate magnate, moving away from his mad scientist roots. He became a sophisticated villain who used his wealth and resources to manipulate events from behind the scenes, adding a new layer of intrigue and complexity to his character. The modern age of comics, beginning in the mid-1980s, marked a significant transformation for Lex Luthor. This period saw a shift away from the fantastical elements of the Silver and Bronze Ages towards more grounded, character-driven storytelling. One of the most significant reinventions of Lex Luthor occurred in John Byrne's The Man of Steel miniseries 1986, which rebooted Superman's origin and redefined his supporting cast, including Luthor. In this reboot, Luthor was portrayed as a billionaire industrialist, the most powerful man in Metropolis, who resented Superman's arrival as a threat to his power and influence. This version of Luthor was a calculating businessman who hid his criminal activities behind a facade of respectability, using his wealth and corporate influence to combat Superman. Luthor's rivalry with Superman was now framed as a battle between two ideologies: Superman's altruism and desire to help humanity versus Luthor's belief in human self-reliance and his own superiority. Luthor's hatred of Superman became more philosophical, seeing him as a challenge to human autonomy and a danger to mankind's ability to solve its own problems. The Man of Steel also introduced a new dimension to Luthor's character: his obsessive fascination with Superman. Luthor became a character driven not only by a desire for power, but also by an obsession with proving himself superior to Superman, whom he viewed as a personal affront to his genius. The 1990s saw further evolution of Luthor's character. He continued to be portrayed as a corporate villain, but new storylines also saw him expanding his influence into politics. In Action Comics 700 1994, Luthor fakes his own death and returns under the guise of his son, Lex Luthor II, with a new, younger appearance. This storyline emphasized Luthor's cunning and ability to manipulate events to his advantage, showing him as a master of deception. One of the most significant developments in Luthor's character occurred in the early 2000s when he successfully ran for president of the United States in the storyline President Luthor 2000 to 2004, written by Jeff Loeb and others. As president, Luthor used his political power to further his agenda against Superman and the Justice League, manipulating public opinion and leveraging his position to maintain control. This storyline explored themes of power, corruption, and the influence of money in politics, showcasing Luthor's ability to manipulate not just corporate and criminal circles, but also the highest levels of government. Following his presidency, Luthor's character continued to be explored in depth. In Infinite Crisis 2005 to 2006, Luthor leads the secret society of supervillains, showing his willingness to ally with other villains to achieve his goals. The storyline also highlights his obsession with Superman and his desire to prove his superiority regardless of the cost. The New 52 reboot 2011 reintroduced Luthor as a more ruthless and cold-blooded character, emphasizing his scientific genius and his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his opponents. One of the most notable storylines from this era is Forever Evil, 2013 to 2014, written by Jeff Johns and illustrated by David Finch. In this storyline, Luthor becomes an unlikely hero, leading a group of villains against the crime syndicate, an evil version of the Justice League from an alternate universe. Forever Evil explores Luthor's complex morality and his willingness to fight for what he perceives as the greater good, even if it means working alongside his enemies. In the DC Rebirth Initiative 2016, Luthor takes on a new role as a hero, donning a high-tech suit and adopting the mantle of Superman after the apparent death of the New 52 Superman. This storyline explores Luthor's desire for redemption and his complicated relationship with the legacy of Superman. However, his true motivations remain ambiguous, and his actions continue to be driven by a mix of altruism and self-interest. Lex Luthor's appearances in key story arcs have significantly shaped the DC universe and Superman's mythology. Here are some of the most important and influential stories featuring Lex Luthor. John Byrne's The Man of Steel miniseries is a critical work that redefined Lex Luthor's character for the modern age. In this reboot, Luthor is portrayed as a billionaire industrialist who sees himself as the true protector of Metropolis. His rivalry with Superman is driven by a mix of jealousy, fear, and a belief that Superman's presence undermines human potential. This version of Luthor is characterized by his arrogance, intelligence, and ruthless ambition, setting the tone for many future stories. Lex Luthor, the unauthorized biography written by James D. Hudnall and illustrated by Eduardo Barreto, is a graphic novel that provides a deep dive into Luthor's backstory and psychology. The story is told from the perspective of a journalist investigating Luthor's past and reveals the lengths to which Luthor will go to protect his secrets and maintain his power. The graphic novel explores themes of power, corruption, and the nature of evil, offering a complex portrait of one of comics' greatest villains. In the death of Superman, Luthor plays a key role in the aftermath of Superman's death. Posing as his own son, Lex Luthor, he presents himself as a more benevolent figure, using his wealth and influence to shape the future of Metropolis. This storyline explores Luthor's manipulative nature and his ability to reinvent himself to maintain control. It also highlights his obsession with Superman and his desire to shape the world in his image. The President Luthor storyline is a significant arc that explores Luthor's rise to political power. Written by Jeff Loeb and others, the story sees Luthor successfully run for president of the United States, using his political influence to further his agenda against Superman and the Justice League. This storyline explores themes of power, corruption, and the influence of money in politics, showcasing Luthor's ability to manipulate not just corporate and criminal circles, but also the highest levels of government. In Infinite Crisis, Luthor is depicted as leading the secret society of supervillains, a group of DC's most dangerous villains. The storyline explores Luthor's complex motivations and his willingness to ally with other villains to achieve his goals. It also highlights his obsession with Superman and his desire to prove his superiority. Infinite Crisis is a significant storyline that explores the darker side of the DC universe, with Luthor playing a key role in the events that unfold. Illustrated by David Finch, is a storyline that explores Luthor's character in depth, portraying him as an unlikely hero. When the crime syndicate, an evil version of the Justice League from an alternate universe, takes over Earth, Luthor assembles a team of villains to fight back. The story explores Luthor's complex morality and his willingness to fight for what he perceives as the greater good, even if it means working alongside his enemies. This storyline highlights Luthor's intelligence, leadership skills, and his ability to adapt to any situation to maintain his influence and control. In the DC Rebirth Initiative, Luthor takes on a new role as a hero, donning a high-tech suit and adopting the mantle of Superman after the apparent death of the New 52 Superman. This storyline explores Luthor's desire for redemption and his complicated relationship with the legacy of Superman. It also delves into the ambiguity of Luthor's motivations, questioning whether he truly seeks redemption or if his actions are driven by a desire for power and control. The storyline is significant for its exploration of Luthor's character and his evolving relationship with Superman's legacy. Lex Luthor is one of the most complex and enduring villains in comic book history. His character has evolved significantly over the decades, from a mad scientist to a corporate mogul, political power player, and even an anti-hero. Luthor's rivalry with Superman is one of the most iconic in popular culture, exploring themes of power, morality, human potential, and the fine line between heroism and villainy. Luthor's key appearances in comics have had a profound impact on the DC universe, shaping the course of Superman's story and the broader narrative of Metropolis. Stories like The Man of Steel, Lex Luthor, the unauthorized biography, and President Luthor have defined the character's legacy and cemented his status as one of the greatest villains of all time. As a character, Lex Luthor represents the embodiment of human ambition and the potential for both greatness and corruption. His actions challenge Superman's ideals and force the Man of Steel to confront the complexities of human nature and the potential for darkness within us all. Luthor's influence extends beyond comics, with memorable portrayals in film, television, and other media. His character continues to captivate audiences and remains a central figure in the world of comic book storytelling. Subscribe to Bad Guy Compendium anywhere you get your podcast or at roguemedianetwork.com and get ready to delve into the minds of the most iconic villains in pop culture history. I've been your host, Finley Strong, and remember, evil never sleeps, but bad guys are forever.